Hey everybody, what's up and welcome back. If you're new here, I'm Liz. And today for VLOGMAS, we're going to cover another 5 identified and solved cases of 2022. I know I already covered them, did a 4-part series of this previously, but there has been more that has been unidentified and solved. So if you didn't catch my first part of this new set, I'll put it in a card above. But our next case we're going to be talking about is that of Asenath Dukat. Now, on June 3rd of 1980, Asenath Dukat was on her way home from Barrington Elementary School, but she never made it home. About 4 hours after she never returned home, she was reported missing. Her body would be discovered in a shallow stream, very shallow stream area near First Community Village, and she was near a culvert. If you don't know what a culvert is, basically it's like a giant metal pipe that goes underneath their walkway or like a roadway. It helps water flow, and this was at the mouth of the stream, and it said that she was hit in the head with a 20-pound limestone rock. Now, her death remained unsolved for years. 42 years after her murder, her killer was finally identified as Brent Stagner via DNA technology. And unfortunately, he would never be brought to justice because he died via suicide in June of 1984. Our next case is that of Joett Smith. Now, 33-year-old Joett Marie Smith was found sexually assaulted and strangled in the San Lorenzo River on March 29, 1983. Her body was bruised, cut, and snagged on a tree. It is believed that she was killed in the late evening 2 days prior to being found, or in the early morning hours approximately 1 day prior to being found. She was the owner of a restaurant called the Buffalo Gals Restaurant in Ben Lomond, California. Now, her killer finally would be identified almost 40 years later. Her killer is Eric David Drummond, and he was linked to her case via DNA evidence that they actually found on her body, but couldn't test because they didn't have proper technology. Now, unfortunately, he would never be arrested because he was found dead this year in early September of 2022. He also is known in California and Nevada for multiple sexual assault convictions. I will say he was already on police radar years prior because of certain discrepancies that happened between him and Joett. I guess he was kind of ruled a disgruntled customer, if you will, but nothing ever really came of it because they couldn't link him to it. Our next one is that of Lindy Sue Biechler. So on December 5th of 1975, this was a normal day for Lindy Sue Biechler. She worked her shift at the flower shop. She then would go and pick up her husband's paycheck from his job, go to the bank, go grocery shopping. You know, the normal things that a wife would do before returning home. Now, on this day in particular, her aunt and her uncle would stop by Lindy's apartment so they could swap recipes. But on this most fateful day, they wouldn't be able to swap recipes with her ever again. Her aunt and her uncle, unfortunately, discovered their niece dead. Now, 19-year-old Lindy was found suffering from multiple stab wounds at the Spring Manor apartment complex near Millersville. This is where she lived with her husband. Her wounds were on her neck, her back, and her chest, and it was also evidently clear that she tried to fight off her attacker. It is believed that she had just arrived home when she was attacked because the groceries she bought were still on the dining room table. Also, her aunt and uncle found her. When they found her, she had a knife coming out of her neck, and it had a tea towel wrapped around the handle. And it was also determined that the killer had used 2 knives in this attack and that she was indeed sexually assaulted. Now, the ongoing investigation into her death, it was consistent, especially how do I word this? Her investigation was extremely consistent since the discovery of her body, but they were unable to determine who did this to her. That was until this year. It was announced in July of 2022 that David Sinapoli had been arrested for criminal homicide. He was a resident also in the same apartment complex, the Spring Manor Apartments, when Biechler was killed. He was charged after his DNA linked him to the case with the help of Parabon Nanolabs. The case of John Stagner. So in the early morning of August 10th of 1992, John Stagner was killed. His wife went to go wake him, but that morning she found him dead. It's so sad. He also, it was also noticed that his head and his face had severe trauma to it. That much trauma to his face is, it's kind of like a crime of passion, if you will. Somebody who knew him killed him. It would be somebody extremely close to home who was responsible for this. Ronald Cates was arrested this year in connection to the case of his friend after he confessed to this crime not once but twice. Now you see, Ronald Cates was actually John Stagner's best friend, and I guess after his death, he tried to go like pawn tools and stuff that he borrowed from John. But obviously he doesn't have to give back because John's dead. But he went to go pawn them for money, and the police talked to him, and he was always on their suspect list, but they couldn't really do anything about it because they didn't have anything to tie him to it. Our next one we're going to be discussing is that of James Tappen Hall. So on October 23rd, 1971, Sheriff Deputy James Tappen Hall was mortally wounded at the scene of what was a burglary. Now when he was found, he would be found face down in the parking lot that belonged to the country club in Rockville. It was determined that he was shot in the head, and he died from his injuries 3 days after this incident. So 50 years after this murder, they announced that they arrested Larry David Becker, of whom confessed to shooting James Tappen Hall when he was in the middle of stealing items from a house while he was bringing them to his getaway car. He has been charged with first-degree murder. So that, my friends, is part 2 of our identified and solved cases of 2022. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys tomorrow for part 3 for our kind of second to last Vlogmas episodes, uploads, all of the above. The case I have saved for Christmas Day, I'm saving it because it's actually the anniversary of the case. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you guys tomorrow in our next video.